Pick up where we left off last class at writing equations of sine and cosine graphs. I think we barely got started on this, so let's get to it. First, we're going to remember what the A, B, C, and D stand for. The A is your amplitude, and that's going to be like the height, how many you go up and down from that midline. If A is less than 0, if it's negative, it's going to reflect over the x-axis. B is the number of times that you see a complete curve within 2 pi, which would be the period for the parent graph. The way that you find the period for any other curve is 2 pi divided by b equals that period. And then you can, you find the period first from your graph. You plug that into this little baby formula, cross multiply, and then you can find b. Vice versa. Either way, that's how you could do it. With the x is your left and right shift. Remember, it goes the opposite direction as the sine. And D is your vertical shift, up and down. It's the same exact thing for cosine. Moving on. So this first graph tells us that we are going to scale our y's by 1. So from 0 up to, I went down to -8. So what that tells me is that I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between -8 and +2. Exactly in the middle of there is this 3 or -3. So y equals -3 is this midline, and that tells you what D is equal to in your graph. So when you write your equation, at the end of every equation, sine or cosine is -3. Next, what we want to do is also note that from this -3, we're going up and down 5. Well, that's your amplitude, so right now I know what A is equal to. So I feel like I'm halfway there, but there's so much more to do. So the next thing I want to do is find out what my period is, but in order to do that, I have to finish scaling my x-axis. So I'm going to count by pi over 6's. 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. When I go left, it's going to be a negative pi over 6. Now, the negative 2 pi over 6, I did reduce, and I made it negative a third pi. When I move 3 little notch marks over, the 3 pi over 6, of course, it's negative here, but that's the negative pi over 2. So I did kind of simplify on one side, not on the other. That's neither here nor there. We want to find our period. The beginning to the end of any curve will help you find your period, and it looks pretty clear here with this cosine start and finish. I'm starting at negative pi over 6 on my x, and I'm ending at 3 pi over 6. So I'm going to kind of count out. Whenever you want to find the distance between 2 points, you can always do high minus low. In your calculator, you could type in 3 divided by 6, 3 6 minus -1/6. Leave the pi's out, and then just put it back in the end. I'm not going to do that though, because I just want to count, and this is a positive distance, so that's 1/6. That's another 3 6, so that's a total of 4 pi over 6. Fine. That is my period using this baby equation. I substitute that 4 pi over 6 in for the word period, because that's what my period is. So 2 pi over b is equal to 4 pi over 6. Cross multiply, b is equal to 3. So now I have 1, 2, 3 parts of my graph. I can go ahead and I can start writing my equations. Now, I know my equations were supposed to be in the part below, but I wasn't reading clearly when I first did this, so I'm going to let it go. All of my equations for sine and cosine are going to have 5 for the amplitude. Some of them I'll make negative, and then some will be positive. All of them will have a period that's the same, so my b is equal to 3, right in the 3 for all of it. They all shift down 3, -3 at the end of all of them. The only thing that's going to change, because sine and cosine is the same curve, the only thing that's going to change is the shifting left to right. So let's begin with sine. Remember, your sine curve begins at that midline. So this one here begins and ends here. I could think maybe my sine curve is going to start here, and then I could kind of consider that sine curve, but maybe I'll just do this one here since I can see the whole thing. Everything else is already written in for me, but the one thing I want to consider is my shift, which is pi over 3. It's already nicely numbered, so I write in the pi over 3. Now I need a plus or minus. Well, when I go left, it's plus. Done. My negative sine curve, well, that's a reflection, and that one is here. And there is no shift, so no number goes in here. My cosine curve, well, let's see. Positive cosine starts here or here. This one is a pi over 6 to the left plus. This one is, well, that is pi over 2, right? So it's pi over 2 to the right minus. But if I want to consider a negative cosine curve, then that guy might start down here. And that's a shift of pi over 6 to the right, so it's minus. Is this next one? Here's number 2. So for number 2, I have to kind of scale everything. So I'm going to number this ones, and when I do, I see I bounce back and forth between -1 and +3. So I go ahead and I draw this midline, and the midline happens at 1, so D is equal to 1. Done. I also see that I am going up and down 2. A is equal to 2. Fine. Next thing I have to figure out is this B, and that's going to come from my period. So let's start writing in our scale for the x-axis. It's pi over 4. So every single line is going to be another pi over 4. So it's 1 pi over 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pi over 4 is 2 pi, all of that and so on and so forth. But I kind of want to focus on where these max and min points are going to hit, and of course these middle points here. So it looks like if I go over 2, 2 pi over 4, so here's my 2 pi over 4, that reduces to pi over 2. If I count 3, 4, 5, 6, there's a max, right? 6 pi over 4, that's going to reduce to this, but it looks like every 4 notches is going to be another critical point. So that one was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pi over 4, this can reduce. Well, I'm going to go left here, right? Left 2, 3, 4. Well, that's -2 pi over 4. So that's negative pi over 2. And then that's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6. -6 pi over 4 is -3/2. Fine. Have it all set. So now I want to figure out what my period is. So I need a start and a finish point. Maybe I'll start here. And if I start here, I'm starting at this number, -3 pi over 2, and I'm going to end here. And I'm going to end at 5 pi over 2. So when I consider my period, I'm starting here, ending here, so let me actually consider that distance, right? So from here to here, I am moving +3/2, right? So that's 3/2, and from here to here is another 5/2 for a total of 8/2. 8 pi over 2 reduces to 4 pi. That's your period. So I'm going to take that number, plug it into my formula for the word period, and that's equal to 2 pi over b over 1, cross multiply, and you can solve for b. B is what you need in your equation. We now have our A, our B, and our D. As soon as I have that, I'm going to start filling this stuff in, right? So I'm going to have my 2's in the front, 2, 2, 2, 2, all the way down. And this can be f of x or y equals, doesn't matter to me. Sine, sine, cosine, cosine. Your b is 1/2, 1/2, 1/2. Make something it says a negative, fine. Make this one a negative, fine. So we got positive and negative, everything's covered. Oh, d is 1, so plus 1's at the end. The only thing we need to figure out is your shifting. So now I'm going to consider, okay, when I look at this y-axis, there are no critical points on the y-axis, which means all 4 of these guys have to shift. So I'm going to open parentheses x, open parentheses x for all of them. And now we're going to go back and figure this out. Sine curve. Well, your sine curve is going to start on the axis. Looks like I'm choosing the -1 first. So here's my negative sine curve. And I'm going to go down, up, ends here. So this is going to start 3 pi over 2. I know it's negative, I don't care. I'm writing in 3 pi over 2 left, so it's plus. Positive sine curve, well, that guy looks like it starts here, right? So it's going to be here at pi over 2. So I write in pi over 2 to the right minus cosine. Positive cosine can start here or here. I'm going to start here. And this is a shift of 3 pi over 2, so I go ahead and write that in. I went to the right, so it's minus. Here's my negative cosine. It's going to start down here, right? So cosine starts at either a max or a min. This min over here is at negative pi over 2, so I just write the shift in, and because it's left, I'm going to write plus. Okay, let's go on to these guys down here. Pause it, go ahead and try these yourself, and then check with me. So let's do 1 and 2. Sine curve, amplitude of 3. It also says that it's been reflected over the x-axis, so there's your negative 3. And here we have our period. Okay, so period is pi over 4, so I plug that in for the word period in your formula, is equal to 2 pi over b, cross multiply, b is 1/2. We just did that, right? Because there's the period, right? That was also pi over 4, and we got b is equal to 1/2. Number 2 is whoops, you can see the one underneath. Number 2 is the sine curve that has been vertically stretched by a scale factor. That means times. That's not that crazy, right? So vertical times 2, so times 2 in front. Period of pi, so I'm going to see 2 whole curves. You can also use this little formula, but that means you're going to see 2 whole curves and 2 pi, so that's going to give me 2. Or pi rather. I'm sorry, it's going to give me 2 here. And then I'm going to phase shift. As soon as I know it's phase shift, open parentheses, x, pi over 2. Then I go back and figure out my sine. Because it's left, I even wrote myself a little note, plus. Moving on here, for number 3, we have cosine, amplitude of 1, period is pi over 2. So your b is equal to 1, up 3. This is a little tricky. This is not one that we're going to be tested on, but your cosine curve has an amplitude of 5, reflected over the x-axis. Okay, we're not going to do horizontal. Horizontals like stretching and the shrinking and all kinds of things like that. Those numbers for stretching and shrinking are in here, and that affects your x coordinates, right? Because that's the x-axis that's stretching and shrinking. So if the factor is 1/4, then literally you're multiplying, right? So your factor here is 1/4. So you're going to see 1/4 of your curve, because now your 2 pi is going to now become an 8 pi for your whole entire period. But they're not asking you any of that. They're just literally telling you factor, plug it in, and a vertical shift down, -1. But we're not going to be doing any of this language, not the language, but you will be changing your b. Number 5, amplitude 5. How am I for time? I'm good for time. I just have to be under 15 minutes. My period, all period, 3 pi over 2. So now since you know that your period is equal to this 2 pi over b, you replace the word period with whatever they give you in your equation or in your sentence, whatever the case may be. So this is now equal to the 2 pi over b. Cross multiply, go ahead and solve, and my b is 4/3. So I plug that guy in here. Phase shift. As soon as I hear phase shift, parentheses x, pi over 4, close parentheses, to the right. Right is opposite, that's minus, right? There it is. Oh, one more, 6. Let's see what 6 has to do. Okay, so we're starting with this equation. After you have this, they are going to stretch it by a scale factor of 2. Factor means you're multiplying. So we're taking this that already went up and down 4, and we're doubling it. So go up and down 8 times 2. So there's your 8. And then let's see, we have a translation to the right of pi over 6. For me, it was easier to graph. So I started out here to the right already at pi over 3. Then I went another pi over 6. Add these guys, right? So that's 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6. Well, another pi over 6 is 3 pi over 6, and that's 1/2. So now I'm here at 1/2 to the right, so it's minus. I was down 1, well, I went up 4, so now I'm at plus 3.